But I wanted to just start out by saying, you know, in biblical literature, when you read the book of Revelation, for example, or if you read the book of Daniel, and sprinkled, even it's in the Gospels and sprinkled throughout a couple of the books in the Hebrew Scriptures, there's a literature type. It's called apocalyptic. It's when the Bible gets kind of crazy and it starts talking in visions and dragons and the reason that literature came to pass, the reason it was people began to write in that way, is the horror of what was happening in their culture was so great, it got beyond words. And so they had to essentially invent a new type of storyline just to come to grips with the powers and the affliction and the oppression that they were encountering. I just want to posit that today we're living in that time again, that apocalyptic time. Our political categories simply don't account for what's happening to us. Our rational categories don't count for what's happening to us. And it's almost like we need a new language. And I think tonight, one of the reasons I'm really glad you're here, Trudy, and I've been looking forward to this personally, is I think the advent of robotic war is a horror to begin with, but in my opinion, the absolute immorality of how we are using robotic war, how we are using the drones, is putting us beyond the categories that all of us grew up with about what is good and what is evil, what is the right of a state, what is a terrorist. We're moving into a different moral universe. And I don't think I feel that we're not prepared for it. And I feel that Americans aren't prepared for it because we've so often thought of ourselves as benevolent and at least subject to the rule of some sort of law. We're beyond those categories now, even with a Democratic president that many of us want to like. But something odd is happening. Trudy has been on the front lines of this. She's going to bring us a first-person account of some of the consequences of the drone warfare and a whole lot more. So thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you. First, I want to introduce my companion here, Linda Wenning, who was a co-delegate that went to Pakistan with us, with the other 33 of us. And Linda was also my housemate. I'm going to ask her to chime in at various points when she has comments. So first of all, thank you very much for having us here. We have an obligation, I think is a good way to put it, to tell the stories of the people that we met in Waziristan. So they would thank you as well, and I think that all of the rest of Pakistan would also. It's remarkable how, I think that we had the impression that virtually everyone in Pakistan knew about drones. And we had just come from a situation where we were tracking the news leading up to when we left, which was in October. And there was nothing. I don't know what you saw at the time, like last summer, last spring, last winter, but there was nothing in the mainstream media, and there was barely anything in the alternative media. And then suddenly there was. And on the national scene now with the hearings, the Brennan hearing, Hagel, and yesterday, was it only yesterday, the judicial hearing. And so it's amazing to me because when we went, we didn't even know if we'd be a blip on the screen. We didn't even know if there'd be any coverage. And what really happened was that CNN was there it took them a couple of days to catch on that something was happening big in Pakistan with Imran Khan, who we'll tell you about later on. He's a politician who may be the next prime minister of Pakistan, and he can gather together tens of thousands of Pakistanis without much trouble at all. And so that's what we ended up with on our march, and we'll show you a film of that. So I think things are changing in the U.S. in terms of conversations about drones. And as Rich was saying, it is a really different moral universe that we're in. And I think that it's hard to fathom. When it's been a while since we've been back, and I still feel the unreality of what was going on. I've been reading about it, as many had when they read Medea's book, Drone Warfare, Killing by Remote Control, which I noticed you have on the back table. But being there and hearing the stories of the survivors. So partly what we want to do is talk to you about the stories of the survivors. But I didn't want to forget to congratulate you on being a city that said no to police drones, and that might have taken some doing, right, to get that through, and that you're also, to get the mayor to do that, so it's only a for now thing probably, but to send those back to their maker, that's beautiful. And right in the home of Boeing, I think that has a special significance. So congratulations on being that city. And there's also some resolutions that are happening now, and we have model resolutions all over the country that people that are trying to keep going on this. Okay, so I mentioned the various hearings. How many of you watched either the Brennan hearing, the Hagel hearing, or the judicial hearing yesterday? Did you feel how well did you feel the questions were answered were there any that were answered? The white paper that was leaked to the news raised more questions than it answered. So I'd like to talk a little bit about some of what those questions are. So how many of you are familiar with Code Pink? Yeah, pretty much everybody. Our delegation, 33 of us, we were all kind of under the umbrella of Code Pink. This convoy, called a peace convoy, peace caravan, was Pakistan's peace convoy. We were invited to it. It was not ours. We were following their lead. And there were 33 Americans, 1 Canadian. There were the Reprieve is a human rights organization that is handling some legal cases of survivor families in Waziristan. But I think that one of the things that we most strongly learned was the level of outrage in Pakistan for the drones, about the drones. And the level of, sometimes you read in the press that the drones are causing resentment. What an understatement. The drones are causing rage. And there were a lot of demonstrations. One thing I noticed about Pakistanis was that they really know how to demonstrate. They could teach all of us how to demonstrate. When something, anything goes wrong, they're in the streets and they're yelling, and they've got permanent placards like those you see there, which I'll explain in a little while. So I want to talk about the trip itself, the survivor stories, and as Rich was mentioning, the issues of morality, democracy, legality, robotic world that we're entering. There were a lot of reasons to go to Pakistan. For me, one of them was just that, was that kind of horror of what are we entering in terms of robotics. We know very little about it. There's a lot more to learn about what's happening, but it is changing the nature of war, therefore changing the nature of prospects for peace, and also changing society and changing our thinking. So for me, it was that sense of apocalypse, and then when you see what it does on the ground, even more so. I don't know how much you know about drones, but it's a secret CIA program that operates in the open, ironically. They have to say, alleged U.S. strike killed 3 suspected militants. It's crazy. Alleged. They carry Hellfire missiles. Usually they carry 4. They patrol in groups. So over the skies at any time, there will be at least 4. And they're there all the time, constantly. And these are the countries that the U.S. has patrolling and targeting people for assassination. The growth of this technology, and it's always said that it is this surgical, precise technology that only takes out the bad guys, and they're just almost rhapsodic about it, the manufacturers. and they're trying to sell them to pretty much every jurisdiction in the country. And when you read the brochures, it's just all, it's the most amazing thing that has ever happened. The drone growth and the growth of the market, as you can see on the slide, that there were 40 in 2001, and now there are 7,000 drones. And we know that they kill more civilians than they do militants. It's about 15 to 1 of civilians to any militant. So the FATA means federally administered tribal area, and as you can see on the large part of the map on the right, it's that little red thing in the western portion on the border of Afghanistan, and that's where we were headed from Islamabad. And then you can see the larger version of it there on the left. They're all ethnic Pashtun, they're tribal people. There were in South Waziristan, which is where we were headed, there were 4 tribal leaders, and the sponsors had to get their permission for us to go. So that was reassuring that we had their permission. And it was also explained to us that there are 6 different Taliban. In the US, I think we think, well, there's Taliban, and they shoot Malala in the head. It's a much more complex picture than that. And so that leads to a lot of different kinds of proposals, especially from this guy Imran Khan that I told you might end up being the next prime minister. So again, 24/7, that's what they're experiencing. The estimates from independent sources, because the US will not reveal any estimates, is that there are 2,500 to 3,500 people that have been killed in Pakistan alone, and that only 2% are high-level targets, Al-Qaeda. Only 2%. That's 49 people. And there are between 1,270 and 1,433 injured. It's more than that now since we did this presentation. Linda, do you have anything you wanted to add on about the frontier area or the
government, as near as I can tell, treats the people that live here much like we treated the Indians in the 1800s. They do not have full citizenship. People are not allowed to go in there. They provide their own government, which is a jirga, which is like a town hall meeting. There's no appeal to the rest of Pakistan. The government of Pakistan does not govern this area. The Justice Department does not provide justice for this area. It's all within the area.
It's such strikingly different narratives of who is in that area of Pakistan. I think, what we hear is that this wild, usually they'll say that lawless area of Waziristan. It's not lawless at all, or restive area of Waziristan. It's restive because there's drones over it. And mainly the people recently recruited to the Taliban are recruited based on drones. So of those 6 Taliban, I think 2 of them are ideological Taliban, and the rest, according to Imran Khan, have been recruited based on the drone activity, how angry and vengeful they feel about the drones. So we hear that, you picture everybody as some kind of wild person that kills for the sake of killing, and they're all carrying guns, and they're, just murdering people. It's just mayhem. From their side, they're loggers, they're goat herders, they're date farmers, and they're, can hardly believe the persona that they have in the West. And so they said, tell people our stories. Tell them we're real people. Tell them we're not terrorists. Tell them we're not militants. So it's the same as the Bush era. The reason that the drones are happening is because we're fighting the enemy over there so that they don't fight us over here, right? So since we get no information about it, we decided to go over there and It's interesting that there were 44 strikes under Bush. There are, I think it's more like 330 now under Obama. And there's two kinds of strikes. Anybody know about the two kinds of strikes? One is called a signature strike. That means they know the person's name. They've identified them as an imminent threat to the United States, or United States interests, I think is more how that probably reads. And they are, they track them for assassination. And then they are killed based, they don't even know till the missile hits them. I mean, there's no warning. They can't hear it. It's so fast. It's so fast that the moment, that's their due process, is the moment when their bomb gets hit by their car gets hit by a missile. The other kind of strike is called a signature strike, and this is the one that we had many questions about, and that now the hearings for Brennan and even Hagel and the recent Judiciary Committee hearing for.
Okay, it's targeted strikes.
Yeah, I was just going to define.
Signature strikes, they look like they might do something.
Right, a signature strike is based on behavior. In other words, it has the signature of militancy. The other kind is they target someone whose name they know, like they targeted, you may be familiar with Anwar al-Awlaki in Yemen, who was an American citizen, a U.S. citizen.
What do they call that?
That's a signature strike. I'm sorry, that's a personality strike. Personality strike. Yeah, I'm sorry, did I get those? I'm sorry if I misstated that, sorry. Yeah, personality strike is where they know the person. Signature strike, they don't know their name or anything. And so what has happened is that sometimes there are children who are gathering kindling, and they are perceived as being in a group. And so just being in a group looks like, from the drone operator's point of view, like people setting an IED. So they have been killed that way. What they told us, what the survivors told us, was that people just go out alone now. The children don't go out at all. Their schools have been targeted. From their point of view, they say the schools are targeted. I mean, that the mosques are targeted. The homes are targeted. So they hide in their homes. There's nowhere else to go. People are afraid to go to the market. They are completely affected everywhere in North and South Waziristan, where the drones hover. It's constant. There's stress. The children are all sick. People have trouble sleeping. They have suicides for the first time. That they told us that in their culture they had not had suicides before, and now people are killing themselves. And it's just from the constant fear, particularly of the signature strike. But there have been people that have been on the kill list. They have no idea how they got on the kill list. So the kill list, you're probably familiar with, from last summer it came out in the New York Times that President Obama has a kill list. And on what's called Terror Tuesdays, every Tuesday, he goes over the kill list, which they refer to as baseball cards. And it's kind of like a yearbook in the sense that it has people's pictures, their age. So that's the personality strike. Everyone on the kill list is the personality strike. And we don't know what proportion are personality strikes versus the signature strikes, because all of that is secret. So that's one of the things that keeps getting asked. But in any case, all of it is what is known as extrajudicial, and the administration is saying that they have the legal basis to be doing these kinds of strikes. So we were very eager to talk with the guy on the ground in Pakistan, who was the U.S. ambassador at the time, and ask him really specifically what was going on with these. So we did do that, and I'll get to that in just a second. You probably see in the news that they refer to a compound was hit, 9 militants were killed. And typically that's 9 civilians that were killed. And a compound is actually a family home. I feel very determined to tell people that. The one you see on the left here with the rose garden there, that's where we stayed when, that's where Linda and I and the other delegates stayed as we were approaching Waziristan, stayed for the night. that isn't demolished here on the right, so this isn't a before and after, but in a sense, generically speaking, it's a before and after. So that is a home that has been hit by a Hellfire missile. And originally, I think it's important to say that, originally the goal was to go after Al-Qaeda, international Al-Qaeda, not Taliban foot soldiers. Now, the Taliban, the people who are fighting their own government in Pakistan, are the targets of the U.S. drones. So that's the first part. Just wanted to give, I think the goal is for us to have good questions and discussion and really grapple with some of the issues. So just want to give us kind of enough basic information. But here, want to show you a film. This short's like 5 or 6 minutes, and it really gives a feel for what we experienced.
My government is causing the deaths of hundreds of children in Pakistan, and our drone program is escalating so fast, and I'm really worried about how many other children in other countries are going to be killed by it. So I feel a strong responsibility, and I embrace the people of Pakistan in standing in defiance against the United States government.
एक दिन रुख करेंगे इस्लामाबाद का और एक नया पाकिस्तान बनाएंगे। शुक्रिया।
Muhammad Anwar lost 4 sons and a brother in a drone attack 3 years ago. The drone struck during a funeral procession. Anwar is from South Waziristan, Pakistan, a former Taliban stronghold. He doubts that the attention to drones brought by this demonstration will last, but he came to the protest anyway.
ने पाकिस्तान को मातर वे ने गैर मुल्की ना खुबी ना चाहता वे आवाज़ द प्रियाद पुरता को जरा सारी सारा जाता है कि ज़ल्म की उम्मीद व्यवस्था ही।
Anwar is one of thousands of protesters who marched towards Pakistan's South Waziristan district to protest against CIA-operated drone attacks. About 30 American activists were among those in the 2-day march, led by Imran Khan, former star cricketer turned politician.
और ये जो अमेरिका ड्रोन अटैक्स और जो हमारे बेकसूर शहरियों को मारता है, इसके खिलाफ सारी दुनिया में आवाज बुलंद करेंगे। अब क्या आप सब मेरे साथ वज़ीरिस्तान चल रहे हैं?
The US has carried out more than 300 drone attacks in Pakistan since 2004. And activists say the majority of those killed are innocent. But there are no exact figures because the area is off limits for independent researchers. The protesters were met with blockades as they made their way toward Waziristan, a military-controlled area where the Taliban once had its stronghold, and where the US has carried out many of its drone strikes. Protesters tried to pass the barricades. Across some barriers there was dialogue. At others, protesters pushed the barricades aside. Khan didn't reach South Waziristan because of security threats, but some of the marchers reached near its border. Malik Deen joined these protests. He said he was a drone victim wounded in the same drone strike that took Anwar's family during a funeral procession 3 years ago. He still finds it difficult to deal with.
यार दा से दो चौदह से अतिया चर के मर गया लाल के पे 123 का 123 चर के मर गया लाल के डेर साख सारी दा बात करी थी 123 का सान ताप मक्ष टुकड़े टुकड़े शी यादा तो पास्तर गो इंदा चिरे.
His ordeal didn't end there.
यार ना बाद ज़ पाकिस्तान फौज बनी वजवाम याश्तमेर सारा तेराकड़ा पमा बंदे लका दहशतगर्दे वैसे कना कदाशी दे दहशतगर्दी ज़जदानन रागल व मीडिया तादा दार रागल च दहशतगर न होगा ना ने सारना दहशतगर व नवीज दहशतगरी.
Other protesters also hope to convey Dean's message.
पूरा दुनिया को हम ये बता रहे कि हम भी पुरअमन हैं और हमारी वज़ीरिस्तान के लोग पुरअमन लोग हैं.
There were other reasons for people to join the protest. For some, the populist politician Khan was part of the attraction.
He is my leader and I am very impressed from him, from his activities and from his words and from his practical work.
For others, it was a day out. Khan's critics say that the march was more about domestic politics than international human rights.
इमरान खान वज़ीर-ए-आज़म पाकिस्तान, वज़ीर-ए-आज़म पाकिस्तान.
Pakistan is due to hold parliamentary elections early next year, and Khan's ability to draw large crowds has been waning. This might be a problem for Khan because street power is important in Pakistani politics.
So it's kind of mobilizing your support as well and showing your political opponents here that he could be a serious threat when it comes to next election.
Some 30 American activists from the anti-war group Code Pink also joined the march. Here near the border with South Waziristan, a protester believes the drone attacks are a violation of international law and undercut Pakistan's own domestic efforts to control terrorism.
अमेरिका को क्या ज़रूरत है हमारे मुल्क में खुद मुख्तियारी पे क्यों हमला कर रहे हैं हमारी मुल्क की अपनी दिफा है अगर हम अपने मुल्क में खुद संभालेंगे अमेरिका की क्या ज़रूरत है
In a nearby town, Khan called the march a success and made one last rallying cry.
इंशाल्लाह मुल्क को बचाने के लिए हम सब एक दिन रुख करेंगे इस्लामाबाद का और एक नया पाकिस्तान बनाएंगे शुक्रिया
This is Susanna Kosser in Manzai, near the border with South Waziristan, for Global Post.
So, Imran Khan, you want to describe Imran Khan, Linda?
Charismatic.
In Pakistan, you never see his name without the word charismatic in front of it, which is really interesting. And meeting him gives a whole new definition to the word. What's important to know about him is that he's probably the first person since the War on Terror began who's in a political position to say, excuse me, pull us out of the War on Terror. We know what our alternatives are. We know what we want to do. We want to handle our own internal security ourselves, and we want to have a regional solution. We want the U.S. out of here. We want NATO out of here. So that's really resonating with people in Pakistan, particularly young people. So he has had a very big following. Excuse me. I want to talk a little bit about the survivors. This is, his name is Karim Khan. We met with him and all of the pictures I'll show you from here on are people that we met with that lived in Waziristan, either North or South Waziristan. And his story is that 6 missiles hit his home, and you see the picture there on the right of what's left of his home. And his 18-year-old son was killed. His brother, who was, I believe, in his 30s and who had a master's degree in English and who was teaching at a school, could have gone to another country with the education he had, came back to contribute to the community. Karim Khan's 18-year-old son was working in that school because he was trying, he was modeling on his uncle. And they were in pieces when Karim Khan came home, got a call on his cell phone. He was in Islamabad and drove all the way. There was pretty much nothing left of them but to pick up their pieces and put them in boxes to bury them. When we had our conversation with him, the interesting thing that stood out, and Linda, chime in here if you want, but the people said, so tell us about revenge. We understand that the Pashtun code is revenge, and asked him, what would you do if you had a drone? And he said, I would, if I could kill a soldier, the soldiers who killed my family, the people responsible for killing my family, I would do that. I'm obligated to do that. And it was upsetting to a couple of the people who were there in the group. And so one of them said, well, revenge, where does it end? Where, the U.S. is, getting revenge, you're getting revenge, they retaliate again after you do, where does it end? And what really struck me was that he said, don't tell us about revenge. You had 9/11 12 years ago, and 3,000 people died. Over the time intervening, many, many, many more thousands have died. Where does it end? Don't tell us about revenge. For him, it's proportional. one person kills one person of his family, he kills one person who, of another family. He also said, whoever was responsible, he also said, people said, so if you had a drone, would you bomb neighborhoods? Would you bomb civilian areas like is happening to your country? And he said, of course not. Civilians are innocent, and your children are as precious as ours. And this is a person who, in the media, is painted as the terrorist who was targeted. And this is what he said. Linda?
He softened his view when one of our peace delegate members said, I am part of Veterans for Peace. Leah Bolger said, I'm part of Veterans for Peace. And he softened quite a bit with that.
Yes, what I perceived is he sort of beamed when she said that, and I told her about it later because she was upset and she was kind of looking away while she was talking to him because he said he would kill soldiers, and there she is, a soldier. And so, it was an intense meeting that we had with him, and very memorable. And I also put on there this quote from him because people said, well, we want to say we're sorry. Does it help? Does it help to say we're sorry? And he said, for big people, apology, double sorry. This is literally what he said, double sorry, triple sorry, very sorry. What, are you going to stop what you're doing? We small people can say we're sorry, but big people like the U.S., sorry doesn't mean anything. So we heard that over and over, how powerless, how incredibly powerless people feel there. These two young men lost two uncles I think it was in the same strike, and these two cousins, and came back, to the same kind of scene of just basically nothing left. And the story that they told was how many orphans were created by the loss of these people. So whole families are affected, and they're affected forever. The rest of the community then has to pitch in and take care of the people who are orphaned, and they do that. He's, without even a break in telling their story, the young man on the left that was talking, and he said, we thank you people that you came from so far and asking these questions. And, it was so moving. There's so many people that we talked to who thanked us for coming, and we were just so surprised that they can tell the difference between an American and the government, and they don't have any trouble making that distinction. They were very welcoming of us.
That's Medea on the right?
Yes, that's Medea on the right. And what you see on the lower right corner are fragments of the missiles. The missiles are 5 feet long. They travel 1,000 miles an hour. Yeah, they notice that their wounds don't heal. Most people don't live after they've been at they get shrapnel and residue. There were two groups of people that we met with that were, one of the things that hit the news the most was in a couple of years ago, two Hellfire missiles struck a jirga, which Linda was describing earlier as being their sort of town hall decision-making body, where there were younger men there, also teenagers essentially, who they come to learn the governance of their tribe or their sub-tribe by coming with their fathers to the jirga. So there were children also killed among that 40. There were no people associated with the Taliban or Al-Qaeda. And there are now lawsuits about this particular one. This is one that is in the awareness of pretty much everyone in Pakistan, how devastating it was, and that it destroyed whole families, whole communities, 40 people in a small community. That pretty much touched everyone. And they told us, specifically, they held up pictures of the people that they had lost. The newspaper at the time, I'm trying to look here to see where it was reported. Oh, okay. U.S. officials told the Associated Press that they had targeted a group that was heavily armed. Some of its members were connected to Al-Qaeda, and all acted in a manner consistent with al-Qaeda-linked militants. So there you see the example of a signature strike, where there was a gathering of tribal elders with rifles, as all of them are, as many people in Texas are, that to, kill a Pashtun frontiersman on the grounds that he is armed is like saying you should shoot people for carrying weapons in this country or any other place. But that is said. That is part of the propaganda that goes out. So for a very long time, that was the story. And Karim Khan, the person that I was talking about earlier, said to us that when he told us about 6 different strikes and in his community, and in one there was a mother and a 10-month-old child that was killed, and another there was a 6-year-old, and he said in each one of those the media story would be 3 militants killed.
Oh, militants.
Yeah, and those, by the way, you probably saw them on the film clip that we showed. They put those on the buses. We had them on our buses. We had 2 buses, and so every vehicle, official vehicle that went, had those pictures on them from the viewpoint of hoping that that's the viewpoint of that the drone pilots end up seeing, knowing that those are the victims. This man, Nur Baram, grew up in Waziristan, and he took it upon himself to, it's very dangerous for him, he goes to every drone strike, every site of a drone strike, and people in North and South Waziristan know that that's what he's doing. He's the only person documenting things on the ground. As Linda was saying, no one has been into that area for 10 years. We were the first European extracted type looking people that anybody there had seen for a very long time, and some people ever, depending on how young they were. He goes into the area, no one else is allowed in, no other media. He comes out with photographs. These are some of the photographs, and told us the story of how each of these children were killed. And what he's doing is the project that's called Naming the Dead, that you may have seen on Facebook and other websites, that they're giving a name to all of these, they are researching so that they have the names and ages of all of the children to try to make it real for everybody. And I put this quote on here because, we asked each of them, what can we do? What can we do? What's the best thing for an American to do right now? And every time they said, go back, tell our stories, tell our stories, tell our stories. Because the picture in the minds of most Americans, anybody aware of what the percentages of Americans who are favorable about drones being used in Pakistan, Yemen? It's like 80%. And I think it's probably changing, it just in recent weeks, and hasn't been measured, so we don't know. But that's something to think about. It's the propaganda, it's the view. I mean, when you say, when the Associated Press says 3 militants killed, right? You're picturing Osama bin Laden, right? So while it's still an extrajudicial killing, and it still should give us pause, it still should be something that we're not in favor of. That picture is what, and all of the, we're fighting over there so that they won't fight us over here. So that's the picture. Until that picture changes, until people realize that the last guy, the guy that was killed, Masood, who had assassinated Benazir Bhutto years ago, that was heralded as a big triumph of the drone strikes. And it took 15 strikes to kill him. Hundreds of people died on the way to killing this one person. So I put that quote on, when you go back, tell Americans you've killed enough people, that's enough for you, just stop. I put that on there because it hit me so hard when he said it, because I realized that he's thinking of this as revenge. He's thinking of this as the American people want this. And our sponsor, Shahzad Akbar, said that is what Pakistanis think and it made a big difference when we came, because they knew that there were Americans that cared, that didn't feel that way. And as you've probably seen in the media, the demands from Pakistan have been many, and they have the opposite percentages there. 95% of the citizens are opposed to drones. And there have been massive demonstrations, that tens of thousands in the last 4 or so years. You know, I really like, this is my favorite, actually, picture from our trip. This makes an important point from a Pakistani point of view because they have no access to the, you know, diplomacy. They have no access to the embassy. And the embassy is so far out in the boonies. I mean, wouldn't you think it would be in a metropolitan area? More and more, they are way out. They're surrounded by barbed wire. We ended up getting through, but you know, the point being that they're just talking to themselves. They know nothing about what's going on the ground. They're there, and so we found out some of the details of that. So we got in. Oh, he told us we could call him Dick, so we did. And what he said to us, because we asked him several difficult, pointed questions, like, has the CIA been doing double tap strikes? So let me describe a double tap. Nur Baram, the guy who that I just mentioned, takes all these photographs and is he actually had an art exhibit in the UK and showed all these pictures. He puts himself in great danger all the time because he goes into a drone strike. There is such a thing called a double tap, a secondary strike, where when rescuers go in, they hit again. And this is a pattern. It's a war crime. This is what the United States calls terrorism when they do it, right? It's horrendous. It's heinous. But this is policy.
This is what we do.
This is what the U.S. does. And it's been well documented that this is what the U.S. does. So we wanted to ask Dick Hoagland directly about that. So we asked if has the CIA been doing double tap strikes? He denied that. Does the U.S. do signature strikes? I think he denied that, or he said that he couldn't answer, or yeah, I'm not sure what his answer was on that. We asked, is it U.S. policy to categorize anyone found at the scene who is of military age as a militant? See, that's one of the things that we learned, is that posthumously, they go in and say, well, if they're between the ages of 16 and 50 or 60, then once they're dead, then they're categorized as a militant. So technically what that means, let's say a home is struck and there is 2 parents and 2 children, and one of the children is a girl and the other is a teenage boy, then 2 of the people in that home are militants. And 2 of them are civilians, right? Collateral damage. That's literally how this is categorized according to what people are able to put together. And what they're able to put together is all of these, you see in the papers, high-level officials speaking on condition of anonymity. Some of them actually just, they're not speaking on condition of anonymity, so people have been able to piece together the picture so we knew what questions to ask. Is it U.S. policy to categorize anyone with a gun as a militant? Why do we have no program for compensating civilian victims? And we asked, are you going to press the U.S. to fully cooperate with the UN investigation that is going on now? So the UN investigation is of 25 drone strikes. Some of them are in Pakistan. And he literally said, we haven't ruled out cooperating. If any other country said we haven't ruled out cooperating, what would the U.S. say about them? So he was presented with a petition of our list of demands, and that was bring the drone program into compliance with the law, come clean on the number and the names of the civilians killed, compensate the survivors, and permanently end the signature strikes. He thanked us for sharing, and he also said that when we mentioned a kill list to him, he said that he was very offended that we would say that there was such a thing as a kill list. So, you start to think, who's minding the store? They're not even reading the New York Times like the rest of us were doing. He also didn't know basic things about drones. He said, we don't target compounds when there are women and children visible. Well, when they're inside, they're not visible, are they? And one of the families told us, anytime, at any time in a home, there are women and children. Anytime in a 24-hour period, there will be someone there. One of them, three of them, five of them. So to strike a home is a de facto decision to kill civilians. One of the things he said to us was, technology always races ahead of the law. He also denied the applicability of international law. And he also, to me this is the words, he denied the authenticity of the tribal people's photo evidence. Because when we asked him how many casualties there were, he said, in the time that I've been here, the figure is close to zero, if not zero.
How long have you been there?
He'd been there 18 months.
His predecessor quit because he said, I joined the State Department for diplomacy. I didn't want to work with kill lists.
Yeah, he said, I didn't know I was in the business of killing people. Munter. His last name is Munter, I don't know his first name. And some people think that he was forced out. So you might have been aware that the Brennan hearing, our representative in Oregon, Ron Wyden, has been very assertive about pushing and asking really pointed questions. And after a couple of days, they leaked to the press this white paper. It raised a lot more questions than it answered, but they defined targeted assassination as lethal force in a foreign country outside of the area of active hostilities. In other words, Pakistan and Yemen, they're allies. We're not at war with them, and we're bombing the territory. They were asked what targeting is, and that is where an informed high-level official of the U.S. government determines that the individual poses an imminent threat of violent attack against the United States. Well, there are dozens of people in Washington who think that they fit the description of high-level official of the U.S. government, so that's not very well defined. It turns out that imminent threat, what it also said in the white paper was, it doesn't have to be an immediate, something that's going to happen immediately. And, most of us thought the meaning of imminent was immediately. So they did get pushback on this, so that's the good news. Asked why they didn't capture, why everything recently has been killing. It's not capture or kill, it's kill or kill. And what the explanation is that it's infeasible to capture them. There are examples that don't fit any of these three criteria at all, of imminent threat or infeasibility in particular. So I just put this in as a punctuation point to remind me to stop, and several more slides. But I'd like to open it to questions at this point, and see how far we get with that. And then maybe you want to talk in small groups for a little while, and I'll present some questions to you, suggested questions. Obviously, you could still just talk informally as you want to, but there's two questions that I kind of like to ask about that in regard to the high figure of Americans supporting drones and what you think might be some of the prospects for changing that. So we'll get to that in a minute. So do you have questions in general? Yeah. Yeah, I never thought of that before, the incentive to come back empty. And especially because you probably know that the safety record is pretty bad for drones, compared to other aircraft. Since it's a CIA secret program, we might not even know what, crashes there may have been. Well, as far as we know in Pakistan, and tell me if Linda, if you know otherwise, but as far as we know in Pakistan, it's all CIA. In Afghanistan, it's the Defense Department, but there is some CIA and special ops, which who knows, what the shape of that is because that's secret. It's all, they haven't even had to ask permission in Pakistan. The CIA decides. So it isn't even the high-level official in the White House that is deciding that. Propagandized, essentially. Yeah, because they're picturing Osama bin Laden. And I think that it's changing. I think that in the last several weeks, because there has been so much conversation and because it was so confrontive in the hearings, and I was thrilled with the Judicial Committee hearing, and I was surprised. I did not expect to be thrilled, but the kinds of questions they were asking were awesome. I thought, wow, did Medea write these for them? You know, it was pretty amazing. Yes. Well, we don't all the way know. So there are bases in Saudi Arabia, there are bases in Djibouti, and those are the ones that attack in Yemen. I don't think we know exactly, probably in Afghanistan, the bases where they're coming from. They're operated, piloted from mainly Creech Air Force Base in Nevada. And it's, you know, that's 7,000 miles away from where their targets are. So they have that high technology to be able to do that. There are probably a lot more bases that we don't know about because it's secret. I think we are focusing on the militarism itself. The issue of drones has, as particularly this program, has been a quantum leap away from democracy. Part of that is the remote control nature of it. Drones represent a technology that is a huge change. You know, it's akin to the Industrial Revolution or the printing press. Or you know, I mean, if you read P.W. Singer, who has written about the robotic age, he's defining changes to the fabric of society and to the. Also, there's another book that you may be aware of, Terminator Planet by Nick Turse. And what he's writing about is the move toward special ops, what he calls shadow warfare. So the U.S. is able to secure its hegemony without much public awareness and without people coming home in caskets. So it is like drones to the rescue, because we've got a war-weary public, and that, you know, that's why it's going in that direction. But I think it raises privacy issues, legal issues, moral issues that are different than, you know, there are rules of war that, you know, none of us are for war. But I think it's kind of, you know, the classic debate, you know, called the sucker's choice, you know, where you say, well, are drones better than carpet bombing? You know, well, neither of them are what we should be doing. So, but yes, drones there's particular issues that they raise that I think are really important for what we're looking at now in terms of democracy and legality. Yeah, and you know, and that gets back to how much things change with robotics. And you know, at a meeting that we were recently at, a guy was giving a presentation, and one of the statements he made really struck with me. He said, even if there were no civilian casualties from drones, we should be concerned about them. We should not have them. So you know, were there other questions? Yeah. You know, I just want to make one quick comment before we do that, and that your comments, your two comments remind me of the book by Hannah Arendt. Well, actually, it was a chapter within it of The Banality of Evil, and I was really struck with that, you know, when we met with Hoagland, because he was just the nicest guy, and I mean that sincerely, and I don't think that he saw himself as having any culpability at all. This is such an institutionalized, deep, the military-industrial complex is so big, so institutional, so couched in euphemism. Lifelong careers depend on it. People going to college, you know, they are so distanced from the consequences of their decisions. And that's, you know, so you could call that evil, but it is not the kind of evil that we think of as being, you know, face-to-face, stabbing someone as you look them in the eye, right? It's, but it's something that we need to understand better. So, what I had in mind for this, and I want to pose this to you, see if this will work, because we've been talking about some Americans and their perceptions of the other, and the kinds of things that keep people feeling positively about drones. And so what I wanted to pose, and I can write it up here so that we'll be able to remember it, is if you want to get in kind of smaller groups, is, you know, suppose we agree that there are significant legal and moral problems with the current lethal drone program, and considering that the U.S. approval rating is as high as it is, will we be, this is the question, will we be able, through the use of ordinary political action, to end targeted assassinations and signature strikes? Is that clear? Will we be able to, through the use of ordinary political action, however you want to define that, to end targeted assassinations and signature strikes? And if yes, why do you think that? And if no, if you don't have confidence in that, why do you think that? And then what will it take to change the drone policy to end target? What will it take? Either way you answer the question. So I can write these up here, but if you could start with, will we be able, through the use of ordinary political action, to end targeted assassinations and signature strikes? There's a lot going on, actually, and some of it is on the back table. I also, each time I do this, I send away for the Ocu cards because they're just so cool. The Ocu card, it's Occupy Wall Street that does these on the military-industrial complex and drones, and they're kind of little slick cardstock back there. You can each feel free to take those. And there's also a thing called April Days of Action that looks like this, and it's I think kind of inspiring because it's nationwide what is happening each week in April. So we're trying to just sort of do this rolling thing across the country of each week doing, focusing on somewhat the same thing. So that the first week of April is a focus on drone manufacturers, the next is drone research and training, the next is actions at drone bases. And in Portland, we're going to start with a drone forum and then try to recruit people and then feed them into the other things that may be happening that we're, have to kind of throw it all together at once. There's droneswatch.org. Easy to remember, droneswatch.org. You can get everything you need to know out and all the people you need to connect to through that. And you can get on the listserv for No Drones. And if you would like to get on that, you can email me. And also you can email me if you want me to send you anything that, because I have a list of reports and articles and resources for organizers, various things that you can get, from art installations to graphics to research. So I'll write this up here.
One last question to close. You went to Pakistan. You're really passionate about this. Can you just close with since I'm a preacher, with a little personal testimony? Why do you care?
Why do I care? Well, in a way, what's the alternative? When I learned that, when I first heard the story about the young girl in Afghanistan that her home had been struck and her mother and siblings had been killed, and her father, she watched her father taking pieces of his family that were hanging in the trees and carefully put them into boxes and gave them a proper burial. And he's never spoken since. And what that story was, how can you go on with your life when you know that your country is doing that and calling it something else? And what they're calling it isn't, it isn't real, and what's behind it is even worse. So there's a book by Michael Clare called The Race for What's Left. That title says it all, really, because we have dwindling resources on this planet. There are these vulnerable countries that are called failed states. They're resource rich. They're poor, but they're resource rich, and the developed countries are going after those resources. The best way to do that is with shadow war that doesn't rile up the American public, who would then, through the draft or whatever else, get in touch with their consciences and know what is going on. So, I guess if you have one life here in this format, at least, I don't know how I could do anything else, actually. I don't know. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having us.